Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Cameron Lawrence, and we are back with week 9 of the buy lows and sell highs. And guys, that trade deadline is going to come up so quickly on you, whether you have it in week 10, whether you have it in week 14, it doesn't matter. It's going to creep up. So we need to make these trades now to get ready for our championship run. Before we jump in, as always, make sure to turn on those notifications. Subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me personally, you can do so at CamLawFFF on TikTok and Twitter. But I won't waste any more of your time. Let's start with our first buy low, Mr. DK Metcalf. And DK has been disappointing. Wide receiver 28 in points per game so far. When you drafted him, you were hoping, hey, maybe he can get into those low teens. Maybe he can be a fringe wide receiver 1, and that just hasn't been the case. He has been consistent, at least double-digit PPR fantasy points in every single game, and the targets are starting to come back over these last 2 weeks, 9 and 14. He's averaging just under 8 targets a game. So he's seeing the volume. We're just not really seeing it turn into fantasy points yet. 25% target share on the year. He is 14th in ADOT. And I think that's important to mention because last year we saw a career low in yards per target. We saw a career low in ADOT. And the Seahawks are starting to use him more down the field, whereas last year he really was that safety blanket for Geno Smith. So he saw high volume, but the yards, the efficiency that we're used to seeing from DK Metcalf wasn't quite there. He's also 13th in air yard share. So the ball is going to him a ton. He's seeing, those deeper targets. He's just not really connecting yet. So I know, with running backs, we always say buying on the volume. The same goes for wide receivers. DK Metcalf, we know how talented he is. We know that last year they looked to him in the red zone a ton. Didn't always connect, but they did look to him. They're doing the same again this year. So I would definitely buy in on the volume that is DK Metcalf, understanding that it's going to continue to come. He's battling an injury. He's over that now. And his playoff schedule is extremely juicy. Philly, Tennessee, and Pittsburgh. That is a playoff schedule I want to buy into. Let's move on now to our next sell high. It is Gus Edwards. And I like Gus Edwards. I think he's a good NFL running back. He's a good fit for this offense. They just need someone who can put forward 4 or 5 yards, someone who is respectable enough that they just can't sell it on Lamar Jackson. He has been playing great the last 2 weeks. Running back 4 over the last 2 weeks, but that has been on the back of 4 rushing touchdowns and an 80-yard reception. Gus has 1 rushing touchdown over the rest of the season. He's playing only about 50% of snaps, and he's only had 2 games with 2 or more receptions. Yes, he is the lead back. He's dominating the carries over Justice Hill in this offense, and I think he will continue to do so. The problem, though, for Gus Edwards is he is much more of a low-end RB2 than he is a high-end RB2, and I think that's where his value might be slipping right now. People are saying, oh, he's really getting established. We're going to see these big numbers, but we see it every year from these Ravens running backs. They're consistent of putting up yards. He probably has an 8-yard, floor moving forward, but at the same time with no receiving work, unless he breaks an 80-yard reception, which is the first time he's done that in his career, or he has multiple touchdowns. You're not exactly excited about Gus Edwards on a week-to-week basis because, let's be honest, we talked about this on the podcast on Tuesday, the same, talking about it in Buffalo, Lamar Jackson is the best rushing threat in this offense. So that takes away completely from the running back, and when they don't get extreme amount of touchdowns, Gus Edwards, 3 touchdowns last week. That's fantastic. That's not happening every week, and no receiving work. That ceiling is a little bit lower. Next, we're going to buy low on another running back is Bijan Robinson. And I know if you drafted Bijan, you're extremely frustrated right now. And I can't blame you. I mean, he is, over the last 5 games, feeling like a bust. He truly is. He's averaging 11.2 points per game. When Lucas is putting out today a video, short form video of our, mid-season awards, biggest buzz, Bijan's name had to be floated out there because he was a round 1 pick. He's only had 15 carries once, and since week 3, his rushing yard totals, 22 in week 3, 105 in week 4. Whoop, whoop. That's great and all, but then 46, 37, 3, which I know killed you that week 7, and 62. But it's not all doom and gloom for Bijan Robinson, right? He's still seeing a consistent amount of carries. He's still playing about 65 to 70% of snaps, except for week 7. And if we take out week 7, he's averaging 5 targets and 4 receptions a game. So he's getting that consistent receiving work, which you need to be able to build that floor, right? He's getting between 6 and 9 receiving points a game, which is huge for a running back. It's, we talk about Gus Edwards. He's seeing between 1 and 3. That's a huge bump, that Bijan's seen. That's why when we talk about these top 5 running backs, it's very different when they get their receiving work. He also finishes with Carolina, Indianapolis, and Chicago. Chicago has been playing better against the run, but there's still a defense that you want to be able to exploit. And so I would personally buy in on Bijan, knowing that he's getting consistent volume, especially in the receiving game, that he's going to continue to get work, that week 7 was a blip, and that his value is at an all-time low since he's entered the league right now. So now is the time to buy in on Bijan. A guy I would sell high, probably to go get Bijan, is Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is valued right now as a top 5 running back. And yes, he was outsnapped by Zach Charbonnet last week, and I will admit that's probably because he was injured. He was coming in with a calf injury. But Charbonnet has looked good in his opportunities, and I think they're going to continue to give him more. Pete Carroll has talked very highly about him, obviously, who was drafted highly. But I don't think, by any means that it becomes a 50-50 split. I think Kenneth Walker maintains a stranglehold on this starting position. Maybe it dips down to a 65-35 split. But the reason I would sell Kenneth Walker isn't even necessarily because of Zach Charbonnet. I think that has something to do with it. But it's the fact that he just doesn't see the receiving work that I think is necessary to be a top 5 running back, which is where I believe that he is valued right now, but the receiving work just isn't there. He profiles more as a fringe top 10 running back, where he's going to be a little more touchdown dependent to get those boom weeks. He can still put up 100 yards rushing, but if he sees 100 yards rushing, 1 reception for 5 yards, in PPR, that's still only 11.5 points. He needs more receiving work, which he's not going to get, and he's a little more touchdown dependent. So maybe you trade him for a guy like a Bijan Robinson. Maybe you trade him for a Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, get a little bit extra out of them, right? Trade him for Josh Jacobs plus. I think that's where I would be headed with Kenneth Walker, than locking him in your lineup and trusting him to be a top 5 back. I still think he's going to be good. I still think he's going to be the lead back. And I still think that us as the fellas underestimated him coming into the season. But I do think that he's a sell right now. Our next guy we're going to buy low is Chris Olave, and it's got a lot of the same reasons as DK Metcalf. The targets have been there. He's 7th in targets, 3rd in air yards, 1st in unrealized air yards, 1st in deep targets, top 20 in red zone targets, and 1st in routes run. The ball is going to Chris Olave. The problem has been Derek Carr. Derek Carr leads the league in attempts over 10 yards, and he's completing only 40% of them, which is 27th right now in the league. It's been abysmal when he throws the ball deep. They haven't been able to connect, but the volume has been there. The volume is going to keep coming, right? Chris Olave, I've said, like I was just telling you, the volume's been there, but he's 12th in receptions, 18th in yards, only 1 touchdown. I believe that Chris Olave is good enough. I believe that we saw with Derek Carr where he's going to continue to hyper-target his number 1 wide receiver. And because of that, Chris Olave is just going to get better. The stats are going to start coming. I don't believe it's going to be super consistent. I don't believe that he necessarily has, where he could sneak inside the top 10. I think he's going to be between the 12 and wide receiver 15 by the end of the season. But I do think good things are coming for Chris Olave, and I would just continue to follow the volume. And this is the point. This is probably the lowest he's going to be to buy low on Olave. And our last sell high is DeAndre Hopkins. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not saying that DeAndre Hopkins is going to have one game and fall off. But I am saying that the height of DeAndre Hopkins, the best that I think he finishes this year is like wide receiver 15, wide receiver 16. Obviously, last week, 4 catches, 6 targets, 136 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That is phenomenal, right? If you had DeAndre Hopkins, you're excited if you had to start him. But let's be honest about the situation. Will Levis is a rookie. Lowest success rate of any quarterback last week. The volume wasn't terrific, right? He only saw 6 targets, and 2 of the big plays were off of broken coverage, which isn't going to happen each week. But when they do, Will Levis does have the arm strength, the arm talent to capitalize on those. I do think that Levis is better for the DeAndre Hopkins. I don't want to get that messed up. But What I think you could trade him for is if you have somebody who goes, man, did you see that connection? He's a wide receiver 2 now. He's returning back to those old days. That's where I think you trade him. Obviously, you're not going to be able to trade him as a top 5 wide receiver. I don't think you're going to be able to trade him as top 10, but if you can trade him as a wide receiver 16, 17, 18, if I can trade DeAndre Hopkins to get Chris Godwin, if I could trade DeAndre Hopkins to get close to Mike Evans, if I could even get Devontae Adams with the way he's been playing, those are trades I would be looking to do with DeAndre Hopkins right now. So I would sell high on DeAndre, but understand at the same time that I do think that what we're seeing from DeAndre, we're going to see better with Will Levis than we did with Ryan Tannehill. Alrighty, guys, that wraps up our buy low, sell high. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Make sure to turn on those notifications. Follow me at CamelotFFF on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and YouTube. And follow the fellows at all of our social medias. Join our chalkboard for whatever questions you got. But with that, we will see you later next week. Deuces.